Most men hit this wall eventually. If the only way you know how to make more money is to work more hours, your income, it will always have a ceiling. And eventually, that ceiling, it turns into a cage. In the next few minutes, I'm gonna give you 5 steps, and I'm gonna show you how men actually increase their income without sacrificing their health, their peace, or their family. If you're the man who you show up every day, you stay late, you carry responsibility, and you do what is asked of you, but your income still isn't moving, this isn't a motivation problem. It's a leverage problem. So on today, we're gonna start pulling every single lever. I honestly know what it feels like to believe that if you just work harder, everything's gonna be all right. It's gonna pay off. You know, a lot of us, we take pride in being dependable. We don't complain. And honestly, we shoulder pressure quietly. But inside, there's always this tension because you're doing everything right, but you're still not moving forward. That's survival mode. In survival mode, it lies to men. It says things like, just endure a little bit longer. But endurance, it honestly doesn't scale. Leadership, on the other hand, it does. So there's a shift that changes everything. One thing you have to truly understand is that effort, it only pays you one time, whereas leverage, it pays you repeatedly. Most men, they don't have an income problem. They really don't. What they have is a value concentration problem. And what that means to me is that you don't need to work more. You just need to make your work matter more. So in order to do that, I got 5 steps for you. All right. And these steps, if you follow them, you should be able to get to where you want to be. So step 1 is understanding why working more hours stops working. All right. This is where you're basically going to go from awareness to decisions. All right. Most men, they're trapped in this linear income thinking. All right. And what linear income says is it says things like, if I give more time, I'll get more money. That may be true, but understand this. You only have 24 hours in a day and you only have 168 hours in a week. So what that means is your time is capped. Your energy is capped as well, and your attention, it might as well be capped also. All right? When income depends on hours, stress, it grows faster than your pay. Family, they get the leftovers, and burnout, it becomes inevitable. All right? Here's some truth for you. A man who sells time is always replaceable, but a man who produces outcomes becomes essential. Working more, it doesn't raise your ceiling. It just presses your face harder against it. So something that I would suggest you doing is a 10-minute time to income audit. And what you need to do is you basically want to write these things down. What do I get paid for on paper? What do I actually spend more time doing, or most of my time doing? If I work 20% fewer hours, what work would still matter? If your income, your money, if it disappears the moment that you stop working, you don't have leverage yet. And that's the real problem. At this point, I want you to be thinking, I have a decision to make. All right? You should also be thinking, I don't need more hours. I just need a different income strategy. And that's where we go into step 2. Step 2 is the shift from effort to leverage. And this is where you go from hard worker to a strategic builder. Leverage, it means your work, it keeps paying you after the effort is done. I've seen this scenario play out more times than I can actually count, where there's 2 men and they work for the same company. They got the same hours, the same work ethic, the same responsibility. So their outcome should be the same. However, one stays capped for years. He's dependable, but he's exhausted. He's always needed. The other, though, he quietly increases his income, not because he works harder, but it's because he takes ownership of problems that outlive his effort. One man, he's literally selling his time. Whereas the other man, he builds value that keeps paying him back. That's the difference between effort and leverage. Effort, what it does is it consumes your energy. Effort also has a ceiling, whereas leverage, it compounds. Not only does it compound, it scales with time. Typically, high leverage work, it usually lives in things like problem ownership or problem solving, decision making, system building, knowledge transferred, responsibility that affects others. So what I would suggest you doing is creating a leverage filter for yourself. Before saying yes to any task, run it through your filter. Your filter should ask certain questions such as, does this create results beyond today? Does this reduce future efforts? Does this increase my visibility or my responsibility? Does this help others perform better without me? If the answer to all four of those are no, then honestly, it's low leverage. High leverage men, they don't do more. They just do what compounds. Now, honestly, the worst part where most men cap themselves at is actually in step 3. And that's skill stacking. And if I'm being honest, that's a danger zone. All right, this is where most men, they go from being an employee to an asset. Most men, they try to become really good at one thing, right? Because honestly, that feels safe. That feels responsible. But this is it. That's exactly why you stay capped. This may be uncomfortable, but it's truth. Men who refuse to stack skills, they don't stay underpaid because they're unlucky. They stay underpaid because they're easy to be replaced. If you only bring one dimension of value, if you only bring one skill, one function, one lane, you're always optional. Skill stacking, for me, it's how average effort, it turns into rare value. All right? You really don't need to be the best at this one thing. You don't. What you need to do is you need to be useful in multiple areas. I need you to hear me. Hard work, it gets respect, but rare combinations get paid. What skill stacking actually looks like is, let's say you have this technical skill set and you add communication to it. That positions you for leadership. Maybe you have the skills of an operator and you add problem solving to it. That gives you promotion leverage. Or maybe you have the skills of execution and you combined it with teaching. You now can gain influence and authority. Organizations, they don't pay for your effort. They don't pay for more effort. They pay more for outcomes that they can't easily replace. So what I would suggest you do is build you a 3 skill set stack and make sure you write this down. So let's say skill 1 is, it's a core skill. It needs to be something that you're already paid to do. Skill 2 needs to be a multiplier skill, something like communication, leadership, organization, analysis, or even problem solving, all right? And then finally, skill 3, it needs to be your visibility skill. Maybe you're good at explaining results or training others. Maybe it's presenting or documenting systems that basically work. When you're able to do that, you build a skill set stack. An example would basically look like your core is operations, your multiplier is problem solving, and your visibility is explaining solutions to leadership. If you do this, you don't just work anymore. You actually move outcomes. And outcomes, they raise your income, all right? If your value only shows up when you're present, hear me, your income, it's always going to be capped, all right? If your value only shows up when you're present, your income, it will always be capped. I had to repeat that because I need you to understand that, all right? Step 4 is value concentration. You do less and you matter more. This is where you go from busy to known. Most men, they don't lack value. They dilute it. They say yes to basically everything. They try to be dependable everywhere. So their impact, it spreads thin and nothing compounds for them. Whereas high income men, they're not known for being helpful at everything. They're really not. What they're known for is solving specific problems that fix issues in important areas. And they actually do it for decision makers. Income can rise, but it rises when contribution becomes obvious. So what you need to do and what you need to determine is, what is your value concentration move? And then once you figure that out, you want to look at it weekly. You want to ask yourself weekly these questions. If I stop doing one thing, what would hurt results the most? That's your leverage zone, okay? And then what you want to ask yourself is, how do I spend more time here? What can I reduce? What can I delay or stop doing entirely? And I can tell you this, it requires saying no. But clarity, it always looks like reduction before it looks like growth. Busy men, they always feel responsible. But focused men, they become valuable. High leverage men, they're known for fewer things. But those things, they actually move results. So once your value is concentrated, the next question, it honestly becomes simple. Where should the value live? Step 5, it's positioning versus effort. And this is where you go from being invincible to basically someone of influence or influential. Like I said earlier, 2 men can work equally hard. One's going to likely advance and the other one is going to stay stuck. And you may be wondering, why does this happen? It's because effort doesn't determine pay. Position does. It's influenced by things like proximity to the decision makers, ownership of outcomes, not to task, clear communication of results, and responsibility tied to revenue, cost, or risk. An action that I would take for upgrading your positioning: volunteer to own a project, not a task. Make sure you're reporting results and not hours. Ask yourself this: what matters most to leadership right now? And then move closer to decisions, not just the execution, right? Decisions are typically made at the higher levels, the generals, the people running it. Execution is typically made by the soldiers. So yeah, it's good to understand execution, but you got to get closer to decisions, because this is how raises and promotions, they actually happen. This is how it happens. And it happens quietly, not by asking louder or working harder. Men who wait to be noticed, they honestly stay restricted. But men who position themselves, they get chosen. And income growth done right, it feels way calmer. It feels like more control. It feels less frantic. It feels more intentional. And that's how you know you're building leverage and it's not burning yourself out. Let me give you one more gem. You need a weekly leverage check. And honestly, this might only take you 15 minutes. In this 15 minutes, I want you to ask yourself, what created results this week? What compounded? What drained my energy with no return? What do I need to say no to next week? I can tell you, this 15-minute habit, it's how men, they slowly start to separate from the rest of the pack financially. Not overnight, but permanently. It turns insight into habit. And there's that moment when growth stops feeling frantic. You're no longer sprinting, but you're actually building. This is the crazy thing. You think the busyness is you working and hustling, and nah. When these steps go into place and that franticness goes away, your calendar, it clears. Your confidence, it rises. Your family, they actually feel your presence again. In that moment, it doesn't come from exhaustion. It comes from alignment, value, position, and focus. And then this is when men leave survival mode and they step into leadership, actually. Here's that framework. Hours, they don't scale, but leverage does. Skill stacking multiplies values. Concentration, it beats busyness. Position determines pay. Do less, and you'll matter more. and grow intentionally. I can honestly say this, you weren't created to live capped. You weren't created to be rushed or depleted, but you were built to lead. You were built to build, to create stability for yourself and your family. Leverage, it beats grind, and position beats your effort, and your focus, it always beats chaos. So if this shifted you, and it shifted how you see your income and your responsibility, subscribe. Because next time, we're gonna break down the single skill that quietly changes a man's income for life without ego or burnout. And if you're a man who knows this applies to you, but you want help identifying where your leverage actually is, I offer this one-on-one clarity call. And there's no pressure. I always tell people it's not hype, it's just helping you. It's helping you see the fastest path forward based on your current situation. The link, it's below. That being said, later.